Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala Rasulullah Muhammadin wa alihi ashabihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Dear Iman TV and Iman Talk viewer, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope everybody's in good health, good spirit, inshallah. And this is our programs that we have, Iman Talk, and every program we invite a special guest to talk about the situation and matters and different kind of topics and discussion. So we're so glad that we have our beloved brother, Br.Ehsan Torabi, which is a spiritual expert, and also he's part of a foundation, Ihya Foundation, and actually he's doing retreats in many places and many states. So alhamdulillah, we'll find out more about this project and stuff. So we have our guest online. Ehsan John, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you, Habib John. It's good to be with you again.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. It sounds like you're in Michigan right now, if I can say that, in northern part. So anyway,
Yes.
Thank you for saying yes. And now our viewers wants to listen to our discussion, what we're talking about. So if you want to say Assalamu alaikum to our viewers, inshallah, then we can move on.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May Allah Almighty's divine peace and blessings, may His grace and His protection, His light and His support be with you and with your families, with your loved ones, inshallah, with our entire community. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair, Ehsan John. I'm so excited to see your beautiful face as far as, when I talk to you, I see anytime I get inspiration and stuff, because you're a beloved brother and you serve in the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His deen. So may Allah bless you wherever you are. So our discussion is pretty much about the situation, and everybody is aware of the situation. There's so much information out there through media and social media and so on. But our focus is just in our community mostly, because Iman TV has got different kind of viewers, and nowadays most of the people are home. So we're trying to provide some English speaking programs for them to represent our views and suggestions and whatever advices. So what do you think? I mean, let's just touch on this situation, that Corona situation, in your view, how you see it, how you find it.
Allahumma salli ala Sayyid Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyid Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I think that, Habib John, things like this are opportunities and moments for us, especially as believers, as people of faith, as people that inshallah ta'ala have some degree of Iman in our hearts. These are blessed opportunities for us to reflect and to remember. See, we're in a unique situation, especially in the modern world, where the distraction is so prevalent, it's so pervasive, that all of us are easily caught up in a world that really fundamentally is not real. And we lose ourselves in a world that's, for the most part, taking us away from our purpose and the reason for which we were created. Now, oftentimes throughout human history, this has happened in cycles throughout human history. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when our Lord, when our Creator, when God, the one God, the same Lord and Creator of all human beings and of all messengers and prophets to humanity, out of His love and out of His mercy, sometimes He will send tribulations to human beings. And it is said that oftentimes the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, He tests the hardest. So sometimes it's easy for us to ask, it's easy for us to succumb to this mindset of despondency, where you think, why is my life so difficult? Why is my life so hard and everybody else seems to be doing so well, seems to be okay? First of all, appearances are not always what they seem. But secondly, really, the ones that Allah loves, He tests. He sends them trials. He sends them hardships and difficulties. And there's a divine wisdom in that. And inshallah, if there's time, maybe we'll have a chance to speak about that. But what we're seeing now is a collective wake-up call for humanity, for human beings. That we've been running in the wrong direction for too long. we have been losing ourselves in a world that is going to end. It's going to perish for everybody, whether it's the day of judgment, whether it is the coronavirus, or whether it's just an accident or natural causes. We're all going to die. So what this situation is doing is bringing that concept, that principle of death to everybody's mind. It's bringing it front and center, and we can't run and escape from it any longer because nobody's invulnerable. This can reach anybody. And it's interesting because it's been labeled as the invisible enemy. Now, that invisible enemy can attack anybody. And yes, some people are more susceptible to complications from it than others. Perhaps elderly and those with underlying conditions and so on might be more susceptible, but really anybody can be taken. And what it's forcing us to do is to come to terms with several things. Number one, destiny. We're beginning to everybody's beginning to having to realize, if it's destined for me, so be it. What can I do? And secondly, we're all being put into quarantine. We're all being put into isolation. And many people are beginning to discover that we have nowhere else to turn to but towards God, back towards God. And what's happening through this is that there's a tremendous amount of fear that's arising in the community and in the world.
Yeah.
Right? This is the real virus, is fear that infects human beings' hearts. Now, the antidote to fear, the cure to fear, is faith. It's Iman, like the name of your show, mashallah. Iman television. Iman is the cure to fear. Now, we live in a world, in a culture, in a society where fear is prevalent and it's pervasive. That's the real pandemic. We're living in constant stress, fear, anxiety, worry, and it leads to depression, hopelessness, despair, ultimately to faithlessness. This fear is so overwhelming, and it's only because we have been losing our way, going away from faith. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, he always spoke about the middle way, the balanced path. And as-sirat al-mustaqim is the balanced path. By definition, the straight path, based in being in a state of istiqamah or uprightness, requires you to be balanced, not too much to the left, not too much to the right, not too much forward, not too much backward. You got to be perfectly straight and upright, like the letter Aleph, right? The name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pointing upwards towards the heavens. We have to be like that, straight and upright. So it doesn't, sometimes when we speak about faith, religion, spirituality, people think of, I either have to now fully embrace the world or leave the world completely behind and become a ascetic, a zahid, and just sit in the corner and pray and make dhikr all day long. No, you actually have to do both. And that's the perfection of the believer and the way of the believer. And it is a difficult path because it's very easy to abandon one or the other, to reject the world and only pursue faith and religion and spirituality. That's easy, actually. It's much easier to not deal with the world. They say it's easy to be a saint on a mountaintop or in a cave. The other alternative is to embrace the world and reject spirituality because you think it's going to hold you back from success in the world. The perfect path and the way of the Prophet ﷺ and the way of the Salihin has been a path of balance throughout human history. So we've been so far out of balance for so long that this is a divine wake-up call for humanity to come back into balance. Right? Come back into balance now. Okay, you have your worldly life. That's fine. But you also have your spiritual life. And if you don't tend to it, the worldly life becomes meaningless because you can't find meaning in the world. And no matter what success you achieve, it cannot provide you happiness. It can't fill the emptiness that's in the root and the center of every human heart. Because the heart is the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only Allah can sit on his throne. Only Allah can occupy your heart. So if you try to fill your heart with anything other than the love of Allah, the light of Allah, the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what happens is that it's like drinking salt water. It's like chasing a mirage. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. And it's never sufficient. And so we've spent our lives chasing happiness in things of the world, and they can never provide happiness. And we're wasting our lives. The Salihin, the Ibadullah, the Sahaba, the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they were so meticulous about their use of time. You can read it about their books. They were so particular about how they spent every moment of their day. to make sure that it was spent worthwhile, because you can never get your time back. We can never get our time back. It's an expiring resource. You can get more money, you can get more food, you can get more anything, but time you can never get once it's spent. And so they wanted to make sure they spent their time in the best way possible, because our time is limited, whether it's 15 years on this earth, 30 years, 50 years, 80 years, 100 years at best, but it's going to end. How are we using that time? And it's not either dunya or akhirah, it's actually both. And we have to find a way to make our dunya part of our akhirah. And there's a way to do that, so that we don't have to live in this split personality, almost this bipolar disorder mindset, where we have religion in the mosque, and then in the work we're a completely different person. And we're developing a split personality like that. And Islam is about bringing things back together, to wholeness, to unity, to oneness, ultimately to make the human being an integrated, whole being, a healed human being, a singular human being. And there's a way to now bring our lives back into balance. So I'm sorry, maybe I went on a little bit too long, Habib John, but
it was beautiful. I mean, I think it's proper that you.
But I would just say that this is a divine opportunity. It's a blessing for us. And yes, there may be some tragedy or some sadness, I should say, but it is not tragic, because the Prophet ﷺ said, if anybody passes away from a pandemic, a plague, they will die the death of a shaheed, of a martyr. What can be better than that? What can be better than that? And I will say this too, Habib John, if you give me a moment, if I have permission. In our community especially, we have a very, I think I have seen oftentimes an unhealthy relationship with death. Death is part of life. And death is not something to be mourned. It is not something to be afraid of. It's something to be prepared for. It's something to be embraced. Death is not what we have to fear. What we have to fear is a life that lacks honor, that lacks excellence, that lacks nobility, that lacks beauty, a life that lacks faith. That's what we have to be afraid of. To reach to death, even if we live to 1,000 years, right? Technology, this is the hope of technology, to extend our lifespans almost indefinitely. And even if we were to live 1,000 years and live without honor and to live without faith, what is the point? We will have wasted our lives. And to live 40 years with excellence and with beauty, and then you enter into eternity in the best state possible, it's no comparison. Now, the only question is, do we believe? If we believe, death is what makes our Iman real. So the fact that now death is in the global consciousness of humanity and can't be pushed away. We're seeing people, we're reading the reports every day. Hundreds of people dying, almost 1,000 people dying a day now. And it could increase. Right? It's right in front of us. We can't escape from this any longer. The only question now is, do we believe? This is a reality check for humanity, and for us, especially as believers and as people of faith, as Muslims, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, beautifully said, and really so much to learn from what you said briefly. I heard two things that you mentioned that really struck me. One was people looking at their happiness and materialistic life, and a lot of people claim, I'm sure there's many people believe in God, but it depends how you just see the situation, because we have our plan and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has his own plan. So we're part of his plan at the end of the day. And a lot of people, how the reality check, that's one thing, and also the happiness. And a lot of people right now, when I'm talking to them, they're complaining and kind of they're depressed and they have anxiety, this and that. And, it's really a different situation for everybody. But are we going to see at this moment for people that they're not practicing? I mean, like they have faith, and a lot of people have faith, mashallah, but they don't practice. How are they going to just switch, come from, not practicing, come to practicing, and also taste the sweetness of Iman, like you say?
Yeah, that's a great question, Habib John. And that's really what it's about. It's the sweetness of Iman. So oftentimes, I think one of the mistakes we make in general is that we equate piety with practice. It could be an indication of piety, but not necessarily. we have to remember that Islam, as it was revealed to humanity through the life and the example and the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, it manifested over a period of 23 years. It took 23 years for the Prophet ﷺ to raise his Sahaba to being practicing Muslims. That was now with the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. When the revelation came, when Wahi came, it didn't come. First Wahi wasn't begin to make your namaz and pay the zakat and make the fasting of Ramadan and so on. That's not how Islam began. Islam began with Iman. Islam began with Iman. And then the practice came little by little by little. If Iman is there, the practice follows automatically, naturally. Now there's a difference. Iman has levels in faith. Now we may have belief in our hearts, but is it enough to take us into love and ishq with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because if it does, then you want to spend your time with Allah. You look forward to the prayer, as did the Prophet and his Sahaba. It's not something to be forced. This is a really important thing. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran al-Kareem, La ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in the religion. It really means that there's no force in the religion. If you try to force, you will fail. Because anything that is forced can't be sustained. But if love is in the heart, it will pull you. It will pull the human being. So what we have to do is fall in love again. Now, fall in love with what and with who? Allahumma salli ala Sayyid Muhammad wa ala Sayyid Muhammad. It's the portal, the doorway into light and into love, into beauty, is the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have to fall in love again with the Messenger of Allah. And you can't fall in love with the Messenger if you don't know the Messenger. We have to now reconnect with the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam through studying his seerah, through salawat, through majalis of dhikr, majalis of mawlid, whatever we do that can bring us closer to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to knowing him, to feeling close to him, to developing a spiritual relationship with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now that is how Iman enters and grows in the heart. That's how light expands in the heart. And then that carries you. You fall in love with the Prophet, you want to do what the Prophet did. He prayed, we are going to pray. He did dhikr, I want to do dhikr. Like whatever when you're in love with someone, you know, you naturally are attracted and pulled to them and to everything they love and to their way. That's why Allah sent the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Without love of the Prophet, the religion is empty. It doesn't exist. It's just forms and it's just rituals that are not complete, let's say.
Mercy to the mankind. That's him.
Yes, exactly. And so I would say, Habib John, the important thing for the ummah, for people within our community, is to again rediscover Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Habibullah, rahmatan lil alameen, Nabiyur Rahma. We have to rediscover the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have to learn about the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I think one of the things that keeps people away from practice is because of the imbalanced examples of what they have seen by those who claim to be religious models, scholars, imams, mullahs, right? Because people are not blind. They can see the state of a human being very easily. And if this imam is reciting the Quran and talking about, you know, hellfire and paradise and you have to do this and you have to not do that and, you know, all of that, but they don't see beauty and love and mercy and compassion in their heart and soul, and it's not manifest in the way that they interact with human beings, if they don't have that level of development, that prophetic character, it's going to turn people away from religion. It's going to turn people away from faith, and that's dangerous. That's a huge responsibility for anybody that stands on the minbar, or anybody that delivers a talk, or anybody that recites a verse of Quran to others. It's a huge responsibility, because now you're representing not just Kitabullah, not just Islam, you're representing the Prophet ﷺ. And if we're representing the Prophet, you have to have that prophetic, we must do our best to have the prophetic character. What is that prophetic character? The Prophet ﷺ was described as the most beautiful and perfect character. And Allah said, if he wasn't gentle, if he wasn't beautiful, he wasn't magnanimous, you would never have followed him. You would never have fallen in love with him. our ulama, our imams, our mullahs, our scholars, first and foremost, it's not just how much knowledge you have.
Yes.
This is a message to the ulama. It doesn't matter how much knowledge you have. And equating knowledge with development is a mistake. That, in fact, is the path of Iblis. So we have to be very careful. You can memorize books and books of knowledge. You can memorize the entire books of hadith and fiqh, perfect tajweed. But if you don't have good character, if you don't have humility in your heart, you're walking the path of Iblis. And all of that knowledge will become a curse. Your own amal, your own deeds, your own worship, your own actions, your own speech will curse and testify against you on Yawm al-Qiyamah. If there isn't humility in the heart, that's the prophetic character. Without that, this religion is worthless. Allah doesn't need knowledge. He doesn't even need amal. He doesn't need anything from humanity. The only thing that is pleasing to Allah is a humble, pure, beautiful heart. That's all He cares about, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when that exists, then the forms have value and meaning. Then they have power and worship. Iblis was worshiping Allah for millennia. How long was Iblis worshiping? And they said there's not a place on the earth where he didn't make sajda.
Oh.
So nobody can reach that level of worship. He has more knowledge than any scholar, alive or dead.
Right.
He has more ilm. And yet look at him. He became the most cursed of creation because he didn't have beauty. He didn't have ihsan. He didn't have humility in his heart. So I just say this because I see so many people, especially amongst our youth, Habib John,
Absolutely.
that are turned away from religion because of the examples that we've seen, because of the examples. But that is not an excuse at the same time. You can't say that the mullah was bad, so why should I practice Islam? You are still responsible for yourself. You will stand before Allah, as will the mullah.
Of course.
And we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. Maybe the bathwater isn't clean, but don't throw the baby out when you're throwing and the baby's Islam, the baby's faith.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. I mean, it's so deep. I wish we have more time. So this was one of session, inshallah. In the future, we have other session to talk about other discussion that we have. So inshallah, there's more to contribute to this program. But we wrap it up with this, if you agree, that there's some pros and cons right now. There's a situation. This is the time. This is the time that most of the people, they don't have any excuse for, oh, I don't have time. I have to do this. I have to do that. So how to just come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as far as this situation, some of the positive point that you're mentioning, that why this is the right time. And if you can just say a few words about that, inshallah, we wrap this section, then we're going to come up on next program.
I'm sorry, what was the exact?
I'd say as far as positive points of view, right now that there's some positive and negative that we see in this situation. Mm-hmm. And as far as Islamic point of view, can you just emphasize on those positive, that this outcome in this situation Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, like time, like gathering, like being around friends, family in a different way. And like I'm saying is that right now it was very, the life was very fast. Yeah, and now it's slowed down a little bit, at least for now. Yeah. So what are those positive points that you're indicating to our viewers?
So I think that's one of the main ones, Habib John, which is kind of what we were discussing about earlier, which is time. Right? Our life is very fast. Our life is going at 100 miles an hour constantly. And that's a problem, right? Because the faster we go, the more stress we create for ourselves. And the more we lose our purpose, the more we're pushed away from ibadah. Because ibadah, worshiping God, spirituality, is about slowing down. It's about ultimately, it's about stopping time. Right? To really enter into the divine presence, one has to transcend time altogether. So the more that we rush, we're actually rushing away from the present moment, from here, from now, which is the only doorway into Allah's divine presence that we can ever have, because past and future don't exist. So Allah Almighty, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is providing for everyone now really a divine opportunity to slow down and to stop. To slow down. Everything is stopped. And we don't have to be driven by the clock the way that we were. Like Allah is giving the whole world now a timeout to reflect. This is a global timeout to sit down, ponder, reflect, and see if you can now feel and hear Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's close. He's always close, but we're too busy, we're too running to ever feel His presence. And so this is really a heavenly opportunity to slow down and to stop. And Allah Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala, no, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith that rush is from shaitan. Ajala min ash-shaitan. Rushing, and he also said that calmness or centeredness or being calm is from God.
Yeah.
So this is now the opportunity to take back control of ourselves and thus of our lives. If we are being driven by the clock, if we're being driven by stress, by fear, by worry, we're not in control. We're not in control of ourselves, and we're not in control of our lives. This is an opportunity now to regain control. And inshallah, when this pandemic, when this crisis passes, to not go back to the way that we were, to not go back to the way that things were. So many people want to just get back to life the way that it was. Don't do that. Because opportunities like this come, I would say, once in a lifetime, but in this case, it's once in human history. This is the first time anything like this has ever happened, where the entire world has been shut down, maybe with the exception of the flood of Noah, alayhi salam. I don't know. That may be a comparable example. Right now, the whole world, for the first time in our history that we can remember, has stopped.
Absolutely.
Now, opportunities like this don't come often, and really at the same time, it's a warning. It's a warning for us.
Yeah.
Right? And, we also have to remember that, yes, we have this pandemic, this coronavirus,
right,
that is an issue and an invisible enemy, but there's another invisible enemy that didn't just appear a few months ago. He has been plotting from the unseen our destruction for millions, thousands of years,
right,
for millennia, for thousands of years. He's been plotting the destruction of humanity, and he promised to destroy us.
right.
And Allah says He attacks you from a place where you cannot see Him.
Right.
That's the real invisible enemy.
People forget about that. Huh?
And we have to remember, we are at war. At war for our own souls, for our own faith, for the light in our beings, for it to not be extinguished by the darkness of this world.
MashaAllah, Ihsan John. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank
beautiful
you.
said. I already learned so much from you.
And
this was, inshallah, I hope you can continue appearing in our programs. And inshallah, we have another program coming up. It calls Path of Love. And I think Path of Love explain a lot of these things that
MashaAllah.
And inshallah, we work on that. So today, I just, once again, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Abhijan.
You stay safe, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for contributing. And inshallah, see you in the other programs.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so
Allah's
much.
mercy, rahman, hifz be with you and your family and the whole community, everyone, inshallah.
Do you have any last message to the youth? And just briefly, what's your brief? If you say it in 3 words, what you say? Just 1, 2, 3.
Last message to the youth, especially, I would say, is to just again remember your beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have so many idols and models that are put in front of us. None can compare with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Jazakallah khair.
Wa yakum. Jazakallah khair. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.